Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, April 10th, 2026. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, importuning you to go to our YouTube channel, Commentary Magazine Podcast, and like and subscribe. It don't cost nothing, but you're exposing us to the algorithm. Algorithms, very bad, very frightening, very dangerous, control everything. If you help us manipulate the algorithm, simply by liking us, it's not even a manipulation. You like us, you really like us, you will do us a solid. And I will do you a solid by introducing our abbreviated panel today, Executive Editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And back from many days of Chag, Senior Editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
I would explain what that means, but if you know what it means, you know, and if you don't know what it means, you don't need to know that there's like many extra days of holidays involving Jewish festivals that make no sense. But whatever. Okay, so
the joke now is that Passover is over, so it's time to start preparing for Passover.
Exactly right. Yes, there's a period of like 3 days in the middle where you're sort of like you can go to work and stuff like that, and then the boom lowers again, and it happens on several other holidays during the year as well. Okay, enough of that talk. What the hell is happening? Go ahead. Got any idea? We're going to Islamabad. Woo! So exciting. It's great to go to Islamabad and have a negotiation over the end of a war when the foreign or defense minister of Pakistan issues a tweet saying that, you know, Jews are a cancer on the earth and cockroaches and Israel shouldn't exist. And, and that life as we know it would be better if there weren't a Jew on the planet. That's a really great basis for a negotiation in which there are, essentially three parties. I mean, I know there are really two, but in which we have Israel and the United States fighting against Iran, with an interlocutor or a mediator being Pakistan, one of whose leaders wishes that Israel would wishes the fate for Israel that Iran wishes for Israel. So it's a great interlocutor. Very happy, really great moment in international diplomacy. Seth, you haven't talked in days, so
I am confused. I come back to you confused because right before I left for the end of the holidays, right before I left, a ceasefire was announced, a 2-week ceasefire. And when I came back, definitely less than 2 weeks later, the Strait of Hormuz was closed, and there was Iran had fired on 2 or 3 countries that were supposedly involved in the ceasefire, and was demanding that a country that is not Iran, or is not supposed to be Iran, which is Lebanon, be retroactively included in the ceasefire that clearly wasn't happening. So when the first round of the holidays came in, the first week, Trump was planning to give his address, and he gave it at 9 p.m. that night. That was the night of the first Seder. So I had no idea what was coming, whether it was going to be peace or, more war, whatever. But then it was just a continuation of stuff. This time it was supposedly a cessation of stuff. And when I came back, things seemed closer to when I first left the prior week than they did before the major announcement of a total ceasefire. So I'm genuinely confused. I've been out for two plus days, and this doesn't look like what it was represented to be before I went offline.
You would have no more clarity had you been there for it, by the way.
Yes.
Fair enough.
If you had been online without sleeping from Tuesday night until the present moment, literally never left Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. When you went to the bathroom, you brought your phone with you. You didn't sleep. You would have no idea. So let's go through some of the possibilities. Trump is taking a breather. He knows perfectly well that the ceasefire is being violated. He knows perfectly well the straits are closed. He's not going to stand for it. It's too humiliating. The longer it goes, the more people who might be inclined to be supportive of this effort are now driving off ramps, like commentary contributors Ruel Garect and Ray Takea, who have a piece saying Trump completely misunderstood the Iranians. He doesn't understand that they're not like Venezuela. Venezuela is just a kleptocratic autocracy, and these people mean it. They mean business. They're ideologues, and you can't just bomb them and get them out. And essentially saying Trump was stupid. So that's one element of his loss of face in public opinion. Not that I think he would care all that much about what Ray Takea and Ruel Garect have to say, but then you of course have all these people on the left laughing at him and saying he blinked and taco Trump and all of that, and then you have the genuine bafflement of people who either believe in the war but don't really understand what the end game was and understand that there's a problem there, or people who don't really believe in the war but don't want to, but think that maybe good things can come out of it, and we are getting nothing back from the administration that provides anybody with a sense of where Trump and the White House and the State Department and the Defense Department and everybody thinks we are at this moment.
Well, John, you left out my favorite theory, which comes as some of my favorite theories, ironically, do. From the anti-Israel contingent of social media, because they always think things are going so much better for Israel than they are, and that everything is organized to play into Israel's hands. So that theory goes that Trump called the ceasefire to allow Israel, excuse me, to focus on Hezbollah.
It is true that the ceasefire materially helps Israel focus on its attack on Hezbollah. From what I've heard in the days leading up to the, Jonathan Chanzer said this yesterday. The days leading up to the ceasefire, Israel is flying 400 sorties a day by air, split 200 each between Iran and Lebanon, and that once the ceasefire was declared, they turned and focused all of their attention on Lebanon. And so it is certainly true that logistically for the Israelis, there was a benefit of some sort in being called away from that air battlefield. Mm-hmm. We don't seem to have a particular view of Israel's moves in Lebanon. There's some confusion inside the administration about whether or not they've agreed to chill it a little bit, or no one ever said that they were going to chill it, and they never said they were going to chill it. And politically, nobody in Israel could say we're going to chill it just for Trump, because there is complete consensus in the political system in the run up to this election in the fall that being a hawk is where it's at. Like, it's more like saying Bibi is Taco Bibi. That's where you want to go if you're trying to run against Bibi, not, what we really need to is enter into negotiations and look for a two-state solution, and we were wrong to bomb people and all of that, which is what American liberal Jewish fantasists might think Israelis would be thinking right now. But from what we can tell, the overwhelming majority of Israelis don't think that at all, and that the Lebanon strike, which we still don't entirely understand, that an operation was achieved on Wednesday in Lebanon that they are not giving us the details of, but which Defense Minister Katz and others have said was a more significant hit on Hezbollah than the beepers and pagers operation was last year. Essentially, I think, meaning that they must have figured out some way to do simultaneous. I mean, the rumors are that they simultaneously targeted every major command and control structure that Hezbollah has in Lebanon, like the beepers. But in this case, it's buildings, it's equipment, it's communications, command control, and that they have, blinded, deafened, and muted Hezbollah. But we don't really know that that's the case. All we know is they're very confident in saying that something absolutely game-changing happened on Wednesday. So yeah, Israel does seem to have taken advantage of the ceasefire. So have the Iranians, right? Because the Straits of Hormuz are still closed. My question is, we don't have degrees in psychology. Oh, Abe, you do have a degree in psychology? No.
I do, yeah.
You did some graduate work.
Yeah.
You did some graduate work.
Yeah,
in
but
psychology.
that's not going to help you.
I minored in
give it a
psych
shot,
for
yeah.
what it's worth.
You did? Okay, we got a minor in psych. We got somebody who did some graduate work in psychology, and me and I did, in fact, read almost the complete Freud, which was really, to talk about a waste of time now. But, okay, so I don't want to psychoanalyze Trump, but watching him as a player and a character, can he really sit here and let the Iranians play him for a fool? Because they're playing him for a fool right now. Now, maybe he's like, you know what? The troops could use a break. We're going to pre-position some stuff. We're going to go to Islamabad, and we're going to storm out when they behave badly. And then we're going to say these people can't be... Once again, we've learned these people can't be dealt with. And they're going to go full bore. Can it wait till Sunday? I guess it could wait. I don't know.
If the firing part of the ceasefire has actually settled into place, which seems more the case today, but the straits are still moving at ships are going in through at a trickle, then it can wait till Sunday.
Okay, so fine. I mean, obviously,
the thing is that
wait till... Yeah, go ahead.
They had this, I wrote a piece a while ago about the numbers that shocked me about the Houthis. I don't have the exact numbers at hand. Things have changed anyway, but the point was that the Houthis had created a situation where they were essentially operating a toll operated, Red Sea shipping lane. And they were positioning themselves to make a lot of money doing so, because you didn't negotiate when the ship came to whatever crossing it was. The Houthis established understandings and deals with China, Russia, and whoever China and Russia told them to also include. And they were paying in, Bitcoin and stuff like that. But they were setting themselves up to make millions of dollars running this port, and they're not even really a country. Like the Houthis are. I mean, Yemen is split. The best you could say about the Houthis is that they're half a country, really. But I mean, they're putschists. They're foreign run and foreign supported. And yet these guys, this band of Houthis had positioned themselves to make a killing off of just this one thing that they could do, which is fly paper airplanes at, ships running through the Red Sea, trading posts and routes. And it just only gets cheaper. So the worry is that, Iran basically believes that now we don't have any sort of solution to this. That's what the Iranians believe right now, right? They believe that if we could have opened the strait, we would have done it, or if we had the mettle to stick it out for long enough amid, popular opinion grumbling at Trump, we would not be granting a ceasefire. We would be sticking it out, and we would be, grinding it out until we've worn them down or whatever. And so instead, they're kind of like the Houthis now, which is that they have this one thing that makes them a real player. This one thing. But it really does make them a real player. And as long as they're able to have that, the money that comes, like if they succeed at this, the money that comes in, it helps them, it helps Hezbollah, like all the constituent parts of the Iranian problem can wake up if money starts just flowing in without any, interdiction.
So what's different about the Houthis and its control of the waterway and way to the south that leads to the Suez Canal, as opposed to the Strait of Hormuz, which is sort of a choke point in the sense that ships have to go in, collect the oil from these refineries, and then come right back out where they came in order to get back out into the open sea. So it's actually more closable and theoretically than what the Houthis. But the Houthis were firing on ships like constantly. Like I don't know how many ships were hit by Houthi fire. The weirdness of this moment is that the Iranians have barely fired on anybody, and they've announced that the strait is closed. So it's almost as though I love these. This is like a New York City analogy. I used the squeegee man analogy a couple of days ago, but it's like somebody comes on your block and puts up a barrier, stands up a barrier, and they're very scared. They're part of a gang, and they put up like a roadblock, and then they're like, "You can't come onto the block unless you give us $10." Now you could, and you don't know if they have a gun or they have a gun or whatever. You have a car. You could literally smash through say, hey, the hell with you, smash through their sign and drive down the block and then get out of your car with your concealed gun and say, I'm sorry, you don't get to make this choice. The world seems to have decided that because they put this sign up or, this, road closed thing up without actually yet demonstrating the iron will to enforce by blowing boats up, the boats are just not going. So they call and they say, please, Iran, may our boat go through the Strait of Hormuz? Iran goes, no. And they go, okay. And then they turn around and they go backward. So Iran hasn't even had to prove that it is going to disrupt and close down world shipping. I don't know how on earth you cannot. I mean, I understand that there's this whole thing with the Europeans and they hate Trump and Trump is yelling at them and all this. I don't understand how the world can let this stand.
Well, who's going to be the first to test it?
Well, that's of course that's where the Iranians psychologically understood a kind of alteration in the way the world does things.
Yeah.
That would not have been possible like 40 or 50 years ago.
Everybody will just flag their ships under Spain's flag and Ireland's flag, and they'll get through.
Right. I'm just saying there is a very strange quality to what has gone on here, that a world conflict has been ground to a halt because of a threat, right? So effectively, the Strait of Hormuz is the new form of mutual assured destruction. We cannot attack. We cannot do X, Y, or Z because the Soviets also have the bomb. Now, blockades are one of the oldest forms of asymmetrical warfare, dating back to the Peloponnesian War. I mean, what did Rhett Butler do you know what Rhett Butler did in his job as in Gone with the Wind? He was a blockade runner. He was a hero to the South because he was a blockade runner. The North had blockaded the ports of Charleston and various other places. And these, brave guys I'm not praising Rhett Butler and his allegiance to the Confederacy. But, this was like wild buccaneering bravery, bringing needed supplies to the struggling South. Like, dealing with blockades is an old human international waters thing, and suddenly we're paralyzed by it. It's a little weird. I don't have much to say about that it's happened, but Trump it's not as though no one ever thought of this before, or that other nations haven't had to deal with it before.
Trump really doesn't want to have to do what he can do to end it. Which isn't to say he won't do what he has to do. I think he will, if and when push comes to shove, and I think it's when, not if. But he doesn't want boots on the ground. He doesn't want to start blowing up the infrastructure that he has threatened to to blow up. So, as ever with him, he does try for this sort of 11th hour, pull out every last stop before pushing the button. So that could be what's happening here.
I mean, Reagan had to deal with something very similar with the Iranians, right? I mean, we got into a mini shooting war with them because we sent the Navy to escort ships through, right?
Mm-hmm.
In what was it, 88? I assume
87.
87.
Yeah.
So it's been a while, but what it takes is America leading the, like, then as now, what it takes is an American president sending a flotilla. We're not going to get a peace flotilla from Turkey to through the Strait of Hormuz, but that's that. I mean, is there anything other than that can be done? That seems to be what you need to do if you really want to open. Now, maybe it's different because of the way it's structured, but I mean, the basic idea is the same. We send our Navy to escort ships through. They fired at us. We fired back, and opened the waterway, right?
I mean, the only difference is that the world wasn't paying attention in 1987. I mean, trust me when I say the world wasn't paying attention in 1987. There were no major days and days and days of headlines about how we were engaged in brinksmanship with Iran on its behavior in the Strait of Hormuz. Nobody in the 1980s even knew what the Strait of Hormuz was. We were talking about a lot of other things. And Iran was also involved in a war with Iraq that, we basically were happy to see them both kill each other in. And so this was their effort to sort of change the dynamic on the ground. It was a minor news story that the United States Navy was engaged in a shooting war with Iran. If you can imagine that would be the case. There was way more talk about the Contras, which was like a ragtag band of people in the out in the, not in the jungle, but whatever, out in trying to taunt and torment the communist government in Nicaragua. Then there was about this. So what's different is that the eyes of the world are on this, and much of the world wishes to see us defeated. I mean, let's face it. I'm not even saying that angrily. I'm saying a lot of the world wants to see us humbled and humiliated. Doesn't believe that this kind of warfare is good. It's bad. It sets a bad precedent. Trump is bad. And it would be better if we somehow lost, because this would restrain world powers, mostly us, but not just only us, from attempting events like this strike on Iran and things like that in the future, as opposed to following a more pacifistic model in which we accept the idea that war itself is bad and always has bad outcomes and never does anything good, and it's evil. It's always evil. It's not necessary. Even when you think it's necessary, it's evil, and maybe the evil outweighs the necessary. So part of this is a perceptual thing.
And technology has changed since 1988.
Yes.
And, as Seth says, Iran can fly their paper airplanes, their drones, at ships. So,
right. Well, that's a big thing. And I'm just saying that again, in terms of perception, right? And their iPhones, and people can take footage of things, and if someone's on an aircraft carrier and something happens, someone will send a video of an Iranian something hitting an aircraft carrier, and they'll send it to their mother, and then their mother will put it on TikTok, and then the world will see a direct Iranian strike on an American boat, or whatever, and then that'll be world news. So we are in an informational atmosphere that makes American action much more difficult. And of course, domestically, we have this totally divided country in which 40% of people would rather the United States lose this war than Donald Trump be credited with a success. I mean, maybe it's close to 50%. I don't know. They would rather that the country lose a war against an evil regime whose purposes are no good and whose own people are being tormented and wrecked by the regime, and that is sowed dissension, irredentism, and fomented terrorism because they don't want Trump to get the credit for winning. And I suppose trying to get into that mindset, I mean, I certainly knew people in the early 90s who hated Clinton on the right, hated Clinton almost the way that, which seems quaint now in some ways, but hated Clinton the way that the left or liberals or a lot of people hate Trump. And like, when we started making noise about dealing with Bosnia, with the sort of the seeming beginnings of genocide in Bosnia, or made noise about hitting Iraq in 1998 because of its violations of the terms of its own ceasefire deal with the United States in 1991, people wanted Clinton to lose. They wanted Bosnia to go badly. They didn't want him to. They hated him so much that this was seen as his mission, and they wanted him to lose. I never myself feel that way about American action, but I am not as driven by the same kind of partisan hatreds as a lot of other people are, I guess. I don't know.
And also, it's like rooting for. It's not just about rooting for America to lose, but it's like, this is all very reminiscent of everything we've been dealing with for the past couple of years in terms of hostage taking, right? I mean, the whole strategy to beat the West is some sort of hostage taking. That's the grand sort of vision, right? And then there's different versions of it and different ways it can be carried out. But this is, and in a very different way from the 80s when they would take a plane and hold the plane hostage, and everybody was diverting planes to Cuba and whatever. Obviously, this is like, I'm going to hold the world hostage. And, it's like, everybody loves that, the famous Norm Macdonald joke about Germany, where, he says, World War I was Germany against the world, and Germany almost won. And then the Second World War was Germany against the world again, and this time they really almost won. And he goes, if I were there at the time, I would say, Germany, you don't get to be a country anymore. It's like, if looking at it from the outside, how many world wars does a country have to start and make a good run at before you're like, we have to put some system into place where this is not going to happen again? Okay, but that was half a century of, almost half a century. So, it feels like that. It's like Iran, like holding its pinky to its mouth like Austin Powers. We're going to, like Dr. Evil, we're going to hold the world hostage. And the world is kind of like, yeah, I get it. I mean, they are right there. They can do it, and it's, and so the rooting against America stuff, not just like from people here, but like from Europe too, is, to me, it's just so insanely backward. Not just because it's insulting, but because Iran is specifically saying, this is not just America. We're not just going after Americans where we can find them. We are holding the entire world hostage. Europe's boats aren't going to get through either.
But that's exactly the point that I made about what it is that people think now is going to happen if we end in this position, which I again, like Abe, I don't think will happen. I don't quite know what happens from here, but within this position of irresolution. In other words, if Iran has played this card, it doesn't put the card back in the deck. That's what Trump meant when he said the strait will open naturally at the end of this conflict, meaning we'll win. They'll be back. They'll be in a cage. No one's going to close the strait. The strait's been open. The threat's been made. If things happen that sort of, as I said, this kind of conventional world opinion would like, which I think is Trump humiliated and the idea of this war taken on by Israel and the United States has been proved to have been a calamitous miscalculation. They still have to deal with the Strait. So we're out, right? We lost. We're out. We tried to do what we could. We did face saving thing. We're out. We're done. Oops, America, it's a disaster. Trump's discredited forever. Neoconservatism is dead forever. Somebody's got to open the Strait. Iran will never open the Strait again. Why would it? Iran sets up the toll booths forever. There's a new 10% or 15% tax on world shipping. Somebody's going to have to stop them. They are now in the position of cutting off their nose to spite their face, and their grounds are going to be, well, if Israel and the United States hadn't started this in the first place, it never would have happened. So therefore, it's our fault. Fine. Again, let's just follow this through. It's our fault. It was a disaster. Everything was a disaster, and an entire way of thinking has been discredited, and it shouldn't have happened. Look back, we look at it and we see the disaster. It shouldn't have happened. What do you do now that this weapon, that Iran has now taken this weapon and it's now holding this weapon? Doesn't everybody have to try to destroy the regime in order to get the toll booth removed? I don't mean us. Like I say, we're done. We took our shot. We lost. We're humiliated. What does China do? Suddenly, China has to pay a toll to Iran?
I also, by the way, I also think that, even in the I also think that what we discovered is that Iran could do this not just whenever it pleased, but it could do this at a much worse moment for the world and the West than this, right? Yeah. What if China goes into Taiwan? And what if, a war erupts, China is invading, our ally in the Pacific, Australia's there, Russia is still in Ukraine. You have at that point, you have, the rumblings of a world war. I mean, we've got a land war in Europe and a war in Asia. We're getting pretty close. We're going to be involved in somehow, At that moment, Iran could close the strait. At the moment that Chinese ships land at wherever they're at their strategic docking place, the moment those boots hit the ground, the Strait of Hormuz closes. What happens then? They could cripple the global economy at a moment when it could tip, a global military conflict to China and Russia. I mean, this is sort of, Bret Stephens once wrote that piece for us, right? About the things that could happen, the catastrophes that could happen. And, watching this feels like one of those, feels like the kind of thing that he wrote about. I'm not sure I realized before this conflict how badly needed it was to confront the problem of the Strait of Hormuz, because we have buzzing, growing conflicts around the world. And this is a key ally of Russia and China, and they obviously will get something back for their trouble. So, this is, to me, it's like, I get the idea that, well, if we didn't do this, we wouldn't have found. But to me, it feels like, well, if we didn't take the scan, we wouldn't have found the tumor.
No, you know what? This is. Let me give you an analogy to this too, which is very interesting, because I think that's a very important way of looking at it. That Iran has always had this as an arrow in its quiver. Never, did sort of semi-activate it 40 years ago, got bit back, had to focus on other things. Technology has changed its ability to harass and torment shipping. Anybody's ability to harass and torment shipping is now vastly easier because of these $40,000 things you can put a little, firecracker on and scare the bejesus out of any ship that goes by you. Okay. In 2002, the Bush administration's Christopher Hill made an announcement. He said, North Korea has gone nuclear. The world needs to know that North Korea has gone nuclear. For 15 years, as Paul Gigot documented in a really great piece in the National Interest, I don't remember quite when, for more than a decade, America had been bribing North Korea not to go nuclear. There would be a thing where there would be some intelligence about an underground test or something was going on. And then we'd send them $300 million in food aid. And everybody would go, why are we helping the North Koreans or deliberately starving their worst regime in the world? And then something else would happen, and then we'd send them $500 million in food aid, or we'd arrange a loan with so-and-so, or we'd say it's okay if China did thus and such. And all of this was designed explicitly as North Korea is running out of money. It says, we're going to go nuclear. We write them a check, and they forbear. And this worked for a time until they decided that it was no longer going to work and that they needed the bomb. And it was at that moment that the United States had these two choices, one of which was to pretend that it was still working. We could have pretended. We could have said they're not nuclear. But we decided the government decided to level with the American people in the world to reveal the existence of this new threat, this crazy regime, which had a nuclear weapon, which could now potentially threaten its neighbors, meaning Japan at that point, given the nature of its rocketry. And the response when Hill made this announcement was the entire foreign policy establishment saying, "What are you doing? Don't tell people. What are you, crazy? Now everybody knows that they're nuclear. This doesn't help anything. Should have kept it a secret." Iran has always had the capacity to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now the world knows that Iran has the capacity to close the Strait of Hormuz. Is that a bad thing to know or a good thing to know? According to you, Seth, and according to the logic that I'm laying out here, it's a good thing to know because now you have to stop it. And weirdly, we're right there in a position to stop it. And the world is opposed to our taking, including Europe, seems to be opposed to our taking the measures that would be required to stop it. They're not only are they not willing to help by helping do the flotillas or escort ships or whatever, they seem to want us to fail.
And there's another way to look at this, which is that the reason Iran has now activated this tactic is because the U.S. and Israel have beaten them down in every other way. This now is all they have left. So it's this one thing now. This is the home stretch. And as you say, John, we're right there.
We're right there. We could use a little moral support, which we're obviously not going to get because Trump doesn't get moral support because he's an amoral player and he does not enlist the world in this kind of cause that would allow for moral support. That's one of the things that he has surrendered with his behavior, is the ability to impress upon the world that the United States is doing something for the good of the world that the world should support. He just doesn't have that in him, and he's allergic to the kind of rhetoric that would lead to that, and we just simply have to deal with that, and so does he. Unilateralism has a cost, and this is the cost. So we don't get that, but logistically...
By the way, I just want to say, counterfactually, we think this is the cost of unilateralism. For all we know, there would be no support of the kind that we really need under other circumstances as well. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
I think the rhetoric, there would be a lot more soothing rhetoric that, yes, NATO, supports our great ally, the United States, in its efforts. Meanwhile, let's go to the cafe and, there's an 8 o'clock showing of of Breathless at the Cinematheque, and we can all go, watch it again. I mean, there's that, sort of like that great line, Stripes, when Harold Ramis says, "And if we go into battle, I'll be right there behind all of you." That's what NATO could have done here, but it's not, and nor is the rest of the world. And so it's like, well, you made this problem, so you get us out of it, but we're also going to attack you while you're trying to get us out of it.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is the thing that really gets me is the doctor didn't cause the cancer by discovering the tumor. And we're being treated as though we put this cancer into the world. So, it would be more reasonable for them to say, I'm glad we found this and realized how easy it is for Iran to do this. I understand there needs to be something done about it. This was still an ill-conceived war. We don't support you going in. This was exploratory surgery that had too many risks. Whatever you want to say, you could balance it out by saying, I really would rather we not have found out this way, and I still don't think this was a good idea. But it revealed a tumor that we have to take out. We understand that. So you can, I think, say, I think you can compartmentalize. If you want to, I think you can compartmentalize, unless you are so driven to stick it to the Americans that you can't think past these two things. You could make a critique of the war while putting Iran on notice that you also won't be taken hostage when they, right? No, you're making a face, but I think you can compartmentalize if you want to.
I just want to add one thing here, which is that the same framework applies to Iran's attempt at a strike on Diego Garcia. Everyone's like, oh, now look what Trump has got the world into. The other way to look at it is, you didn't know that they could jigger a ballistic missile to get that far, Europe.
Yeah.
Aren't you glad you know now?
Yeah. Well, no, because then they have to, then knowing it. I mean, that is the thing about the tumor, right? It's like, you're telling me I have a tumor and I need to have surgery. I'm not in pain. So, like, now you're going to make me have surgery. I'm going to have to recover. It's going to really hurt. The hell, I could have just lived in sweet ignorance, and then maybe I would drop dead, one day, but then I'd be dead, so I wouldn't care. Or I'll deal with it when it gets really, 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 really painful. But I don't feel anything, and you're telling me I'm sick. So yeah, people do get really angry. But even that would be
better than what they're saying, right? I could even accept that from the Europeans saying, right. Not all tumors need to come out right away. It doesn't mean we need to, go in right away.
Right.
And, this is something we may have to deal with down the line. It's obviously a tumor, right? That's what I'm looking for. It's like, we all agree this is a tumor, right?
It's not a tumor.
It's not a tumor.
Anyway, okay. But you know what? I've done this 45 minutes here. We're 45 minutes. And I've been trying to cast my mind outside of my own mindset, right? In framing all of this to say the war was a mistake. What do you do if the war was a mistake? You still have to activate the American military to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's why Trump went with the ceasefire, because he said we can't have the Strait of Hormuz closed. Okay? I think, as I will never tire of saying, that the end game of this moment has got to be a change in the regime in Iran. That end game does not have to be in April of 2026. It does not have to be in September of 2026. The regime cannot survive this and the war be deemed a success. We have that. We have a record of that from 1991. And we have other records of it. And so the regime has to change, because no configuration of Iran under these circumstances can be an honest actor, as we've seen since Tuesday night, where they are still firing on things and they're closing the strait and all of that. And somehow that's fine with them. And they said they wouldn't, and now they're doing it. So they're not small bore is what happens when Iran is left to its own devices, even after 52 days of having been hammered the way almost nothing has ever been hammered except the island of Malta during World War II. Okay, so, but I want to pull away now from let me try to think this through like I'm not me and go back to being me. And what I'm saying is Trump's temptation was Trump found himself in a position. He decided he needed to say that the ceasefire was a thing on Tuesday night. Trump's temptation is to not restart the war somehow and to come up with some Truth Social tweet that will get him out of this in some fashion. And I think that based on his behavior, he's many things, but he's not really inconstant in the sense that when he pursues a policy, the policy does not change. If he is pursuing an anti-immigration policy, it never changes. He doesn't go pro-immigration. He does this, he does that, he suspends that, he takes ICE out of Minneapolis, because that's not working tactically. But his goal doesn't change. And his goal is to get rid of the Iranian regime. That is his actual goal. He's not saying it's his goal. He doesn't want to do regime change in the sense that he doesn't want to have to be responsible for the regime after it's gone. But that is his goal. I don't think his goal, or he doesn't need regime change. He wants the nuclear materials, which I think is probably the same thing regardless. And his goals don't change. He's not a different person today from the person he was on Tuesday morning when he said, I'm going to destroy your civilization. Even if he didn't mean he was going to destroy their civilization.
Someone wrote a piece.
I don't see how he goes to Islamabad or Vance goes to Islamabad and leaves saying we've made a deal.
Someone wrote a piece yesterday, and I'm sorry I can't credit them because I don't remember who it was, and it was somewhere that I don't normally I don't read regularly, but they framed a sort of a theory of Trump as soft taco, which is that Trump doesn't chicken out. He sort of pulls back on the optics when things get heated, as in Minnesota, as with Doge. But as you're saying, John, the policy goals remain the same.
There's something else here that he does that he's getting used to that is having a weird effect on things, which is that he knows who are the two people who on Earth who can swing the stock market basically whenever they want and they have a stray thought, right? Donald Trump and Elon Musk are basically the two people who, every few years Elon Musk will tweet something like, oh, maybe I should buy so and so, and then he'll have an SEC investigation or whatever. You can't say that publicly. You can't, whatever. But those are the two guys who can really send the market running. Trump realizes that he can also calm the markets by saying things like, well, we'll have a ceasefire, and you know what? Maybe we'll cooperate a toll with the Iranians. Like, the market doesn't care because the market is like an animal in that way. It's like if suddenly the threat is no longer baring its teeth at the market. And so the market settles down. The hair on its neck goes down and its claws get retracted and whatever. But the effect of this is that there's a whole world of people who are listening to every word, and they're like, wait a second, we're going to co-run a toll situation with Iran, so we're going to share we're going to basically allow them to have a 50% ownership stake in the Strait of Tehran, in response to this. Now, that's not something that's going to happen. I firmly believe that this will not end with a U.S.-Iran co-toll booth in the Strait of Hormuz, okay? But the effect of it is that if he throws out ideas like this every so often, the markets calm themselves. And we have this weird situation where he's incentivized to talk peacenik and quickly runs out of sane things to say. And so, like, the peacenik things that come out of his mouth to calm the markets are totally insane. And the markets are like, we love this idea. This is great. Let's do this. So how he maneuvers, he's pushing himself into this world where does he know what's real, what's possible, that's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, so that you raise a very interesting point. And then, of course, we have all these weird questions about the betting markets and the role the betting markets are playing, and the fact that there's this new actor in the form of the betting markets and crypto, where people might be running safe haven into crypto, which will enrich people who are friends of his and relatives of his. And so there's all kinds of weird moving pieces that should properly give people pause. But in the grand design of things, Trump is sitting there with the knowledge that he cannot conclude whatever this is with Iran holding the blackmail over the Strait of Hormuz. And there are various stratagems that can be applied to ensure that that does not happen. There is the announcement of the flotilla support. There is some effort to put boots on the ground to occupy the high ground, to place some anti-aircraft batteries right there to shoot things down that might be flying out of Iran, to hold positions on Kharg Island to choke its own revenues off, whatever. There are many modalities that can be taken into account. And again, a ceasefire in the course of a war does not in and of itself mean that nothing is happening. I mean, we should remember that in the course of ordinary conventional wars, this functions as a battle. It's been like a 48-day battle. That is to say that there have been military, constant until the ceasefire, constant hostilities, day after day after day after day after day after day, right? That's actually not usually what war is like. Battles take place as spasms, that take place over a week. Sometimes there's a siege, right? I mean, the siege of Leningrad, the siege of Stalingrad, sieges that take forever. But it's not that the guns are firing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So this is a battle. This battle came to a ceasefire. Sometimes there are ceasefires, and then they start up again. And we're going to start up again unless Iran is a very different place from what I think it is when they get to Islamabad. From what we're hearing, they may not even go to Islamabad. Or if they go to Islamabad, they're going to say, well, you better pay us reparations. And, and Israel has to stop doing whatever it's doing in Hezbollah. And it has to pay us reparations. And you have to shine our shoes. And you have to convert to Islam and whatever. And then they'll say enough that will be so offensive that he will get really angry. And even though J.D. Vance as the chief negotiator has every incentive, given his own interestingly precarious political position, to try to want to bring a victory back from Islamabad in the form of a ceasefire, he's going to have to walk away if he's going to maintain any kind of residue of credibility with Trump, if they are as insulting toward Trump as I imagine that they are likely to be.
They will be, because, John, not only are they not an entirely different regime than they were before, but as Jonathan Schanzer pointed out on the podcast this week, because of the beating the regime took, they have to show some form of cosmetic strength or strength to buck up their support among Iranians. So their obstinacy now is going to be at an 11. I mean, it always was, but it's going to be at a 12.
Right. I suppose we should not end this week without discussing Trump's nuclear option. Trump took the nuclear option against the woke right podcast bros and girl. girls. Specifically, what was it? Tucker, Alex Jones, Candace Owens, Meghan, Kelly. Was there somebody else mentioned in there? I can't remember. The tweet is an act of rhetorical brilliance that will be studied for centuries to come against once calmer heads have prevailed, that people understand that Trump has sort of inaugurated a new form of leadership communications that has its own set of rhetorical rules that have purchase. They pushed him too far. The word satanic, I think, over the past weekend, that was the moment that made him. So they're low IQ, they're stupid. Candace Owens is ugly. In fact, she's way uglier than the very distinguished and beautiful Brigitte Macron, whom she falsely accuses of being a man and whom he hopes will win billions in a lawsuit against Candace Owens for making this claim. They're not MAGA, he's MAGA. They stand for nothing, he stands for everything. And, this is a petty matter in many ways, because this is all about how they are gaining audience for on the Spotify list, and where they stand on the Spotify list of most listened to podcasts, and what they're garnering and all of that. But the confusion of them with a political movement. Trump is now literally challenging the idea that if you're either with me or you're with the terrorists. I mean, that is literally sort of what this tweet was about. You cannot like me and like Tucker Carlson any longer, said Trump. Do we think that that's going to have an effect? Are they going to get scared? Are they, aside from whatever influence they may have, which I don't think they will have anymore, with him or inside the precincts of power? Not that I think Candace did, but Tucker obviously is in a weird position here. Is it going to matter?
J.D. Vance is in a weird position here.
Very, yeah.
Yeah. I had this thought, which was that, look, obviously I'm glad he split with this group of misfits. I do sort of wish he said they're a bunch of anti-American grifters, that's all. Because there's a certain elevating quality to the President of the United States spending that much time and energy and that long of a social media post on you. I think in some sense they're delighted because it raises their profile.
Well,
it's funny to watch their. Yeah.
But let me just respond to what Abe said, because he does conclude by saying, MAGA is about winning and strength and not allowing Iran to have nuclear weapons. MAGA is about making America great again, and these people have no idea how to do that, but I do. So he didn't say they're anti-American grifters, but he said they have no idea how to make America great again. So maybe that's not quite there, but he's.
I just mean I wish he was more dismissive, as opposed to, as opposed to attacking them at the great length he did. I think it actually would have worked. It's counterintuitive, but I think it.
Yeah, as I say, I'm not sure I agree with you, because I think he is who he is, and there's the tweet itself has many interesting angles, including the misnaming of Marjorie Taylor Greene as Marjorie Trader Brown, which I think was not a mistake, and him sort of like throwing shade on Candace Owens, not only about her looks, but also like praising the character of Brigitte Macron, which, boy, talk about something coming out of nowhere, like that he likes Brigitte Macron. It doesn't seem to like Emmanuel Macron, as far as I can tell. Anyway. So I'm a supporter of the length myself, but that's me.
Well, see, he's not anti-Europe. Clearly, he's rooting for France.
Remember,
But
France.
I also
France
like,
has a weird relation to NATO, though. Remember, France was
yes,
always very France. De
yeah,
Gaulle didn't like NATO either. So,
yep, yep.
um,
Take that, Lafayette. I think that the other interesting part of this is the way that some of their complaints sound like the those of us who have been deemed squishes for years. Like Megyn Kelly, she one of the things that in the Time story about the dust up, they highlight how she said the other day something like, "Well, he sounds like a movie villain. Can't he just be normal? Can't he just be a normal person?" And it's like, some of us have been slightly more politely maybe requesting that this change take place, over the past 11 years, whatever it's been since since it was clear that he was running, whatever. But it was like, people always made fun of it because they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry about the mean tweets. Sorry, neocons, about the mean tweets. You're so sad about the mean tweets." But meanwhile, he's saving the world and doing this and that. And he put Gorsuch on the bench, and he put this person on the bench, and but he overturned Roe v. Wade. And you're upset about mean tweets. But that's how they sound now. The Megyn Kellys of the world, the Tucker Carlsons, they were Candace Owens for sure, Alex Jones. These people were as dismissive as anybody of the idea that Trump's tone matters, or it's like watching them tone police Trump it's an amazing thing to see, because it's like suddenly they realize that it matters what a president says and whatever, but they have no credibility to make that complaint. They've been arguing for literally a decade that doesn't matter.
I remember when he said that Megyn Kelly had blood coming out of her wherever, and that was why she was so mean to him at the first debate in 2015. Now she's like, can't he be normal? Isn't this where this all started? Isn't this literally where it all started, with his incredibly personal attack on Megyn Kelly for asking him a question about his treatment of women? That was where Trump exploded out into the national consciousness as a guy who was going to evade every rule that had ever been established in American politics. She was the target. What crocodile tears is she crying now? Can't he just be normal? Can't you be normal? Can't you be consistent for 5 seconds instead of whoring after Spotify list position? Like, hold to your point. Stop attacking Israel. Stop being an anti-Semite. Stop being a hypocrite. Stop being a coward, and stop whining. Yeah, because we weren't whining. We're like, don't do this. It's self-destructive. I think it's actually pretty clear that it is in a lot of ways self-destructive, as I think the last week has shown with the, blow up a civilization, and then, oh my God, how do I get out of this? I'm not going to blow up their civilization. But
right, and we've had congressional deals fall apart because we've had like budgets dissipate into the air because Trump tweeted something about it.
To get them saying he's being so mean to me. Oh, well, wow, amnesia is a hell of a drug. If you start a podcast, apparently. It's just etch a sketch your entire life, Megyn Kelly, and then say that, can't Trump be normal? Okay, I want to make a quick recommendation, and then we'll close out for the weekend. I managed earlier this week to go see, in a movie theater, Goodfellas, the 1990 Martin Scorsese gangster, sort of real life gangster movie about the mafia. Which I really haven't seen since it came out. It is no shocker to say that it's a masterpiece, which it is, and one of the most propulsive movies ever made, which it is, and one of the most interestingly and brilliantly structured movies ever made, which it is, because it's essentially in 3 acts. It's the temptation of Henry Hill, who is our hero, the maturation of Henry Hill as a gangster increasingly involved in violence and frenzy, and then the collapse of Henry Hill into drug addicted, paranoia, and an understanding that the world he is in features no loyalties, and is a world of psychopathy in which the only way that he can save himself is through becoming the worst kind of a stool pigeon. So it's an amazing piece of work. But what really struck me this time is how moral it is. That the whole point of the movie is that it is a corrective to The Godfather, which came out and changed everything. Was a corrective, was itself a kind of effort to take the mafia and turn it into sort of like a story of a grand American tragedy, and the kind of nature of the way in which America both creates villains or something like that. And this is a movie about the evil of The Godfather. It's a movie about dealing with the fantasy that these people do things because they want to help their family, or they have no other choice and there's nothing else for them to do. They are, in fact, all amoral, psychopathic monsters, and they deserve nothing but the worst. They have no admirable qualities. Their charms fade, their evil surfaces and is undeniable, and what you're left with is nothing except Henry Hill realizing that he is a schnook, which is the last word that is spoken in the movie. It's great. It's really great. I was really stunned by how great it was, and so I recommend it highly. Very violent.
Rest in peace, Ray Liotta.
Rest in peace, Ray Liotta. Absolutely.
My favorite thing about that, by the way, was that when he died in 2023, 2022 or 2023. When he died, he had all these other projects in the works, and he's so good in things he could sort of be a character actor too. He didn't have to necessarily be pigeonholed. He had all these other things in the works, and movies started coming out with him after he died.
Yeah.
And I was caught between, this is wonderful, because it's like getting a visit, beyond the grave, and also it's slightly creepy because it's like getting a visit beyond the grave. Like I didn't a full year after he died, he had a scene in the Cocaine Bear movie.
That's right. But there's one thing about this which is interesting, which is the phenomenon of the kind of like surreally great casting of somebody who never remotely approaches what he was able to do in that movie ever again, and it's this kind of like
I think you can say that for all the leads in the movie, actually.
Well, Pesci did My Cousin Vinny after it, and that was a pretty
great.
Interesting
and
turn. But Paul Sorvino never was anything remotely like this. But I am struck. It's sort of like these things like where Tony Curtis is in The Sweet Smell of Success. It's one of the greatest performances ever on film. He was nothing like it before. He never did anything remotely like it again.
Yeah.
Scorsese got Liotta at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, doing exactly the right things, and he fit it like a glove, and nothing else ever quite fit it the same.
There's another aspect of it, when I've seen it recently, that struck me, which is that at the time Goodfellas was made, the mafia as it was still existed to a large degree as it was portrayed. Today, it's a very different thing. I mean, they're still out there, the mob, but they're doing digital crimes. They're doing sort of like white collar extortion and online gambling. All that stuff, and it's not.
They're driving an Uber Eats at night.
Yeah, it's amazing because to me it doesn't seem that long ago. Obviously it was, but it's a historical document in that sense.
Yeah. Well, it is.
But in that way, it was more accurate than the Godfather movie.
Totally.
Right? I mean, part of the point of Goodfellas is that it was flimsy. The whole thing was flimsier than it looked and it felt, when you had the barrel of a gun pointing at you. But the whole structure was really not as strong as it was. Yeah. And, the Godfather sort of made it to be these like sort of unbreakable systems, but Goodfellas was like,
No,
at one point it was much
poke a
stronger.
hole in the boat and it'll sink.
Yeah. But I mean, The Godfather was an effort to take the mafia and make a mythology out of it. That these were like, the Roman emperors, or it's a Balzac novel in American terms. And Goodfellas is like, the hell with that. These guys are goons, thugs, vicious monster. They only have this success because they gather together and they're constantly turning on each other and they're constantly killing each other. And once you get in, you can't get out. And it's also worth pointing out that it's a historical document because it's set. It was made in 1990. It's really set from 1960 to about 1970, when the Lufthansa, the famous hijacking of at Kennedy Airport of a Lufthansa, cargo, was pulled off, and then that's when the swarm came in and they broke up this ring. So it sort of ends as Henry Hill goes into the witness protection program, and that's already 15 years earlier than the movie was made. And what also came between then and the movie was the breakup of the mafia, the Ravenite Social Club, other things that Rudy Giuliani as DA, as the U.S. attorney in New York helped shepherd, which was the kind of RICO statute destruction of the mafia when they went in, and you then heard all of these tapes from the Ravenite Social Club in Greenwich Village. When you heard what they sounded like, and what they didn't sound like was, "You come to tell me about what you would like for your daughter, and I would like to help you, but we have our own," and that's not what they sounded like. They didn't sound like the conversation between Marlon Brando and the heads of the five families. They sounded like every horrible person you ever met, speaking basically illiterately, and like they could barely even get a sentence out without a profanity. So that was a very startling thing, that we had so lost our sense of who a thug actually was. Anyway, it's a great movie. And it is like seeing The Sopranos in small bore, because like every single person in the movie was later in The Sopranos. Like every tertiary character, Frank Leotardo is Joey Bats, like that kind of thing. Like you're like, oh my God, there's Frank Leotardo. He's so young. Look how young he is, because it was 10 years before The Sopranos.
And
anyway.
Leota was in the HBO post Sopranos postscript movie, the one they made. The Many Saints of Newark. Leota was in that too.
So bad.
Yeah,
so bad. Okay, Goodfellas recommendation. War Starting Again, our other recommendation. We'll be back on Monday. So for Seth and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.